All right, it's great to be here. So I'm going to be talking about AI. Have you heard of this thing? No? Yeah, I guess the word has gotten around. Interesting stuff happening in the world. And I'm going to offer two metaphors, the way I look at this weird technology. One is Einstein in your basement. And I don't mean that actual person. I mean like a metaphor for any smart person who ever lived. AI can be seen as this really smart dude in your basement. You can ask them questions. They'll answer anything for you and never get tired of you, never get impatient. Sometimes hallucinate a little bit and make mistakes, but a useful tool. Another metaphor, I think, is this intelligence as a service, this brain floating in the sky, anyone can talk to. It's just a useful mental model. However, this is new, and it's kind of hyped. So there's a lot of kind of crappy products being built all over the place. We're kind of in the same space we were with when the iPhone came, right? How many of you remembered iBeer? You could like go like this and see the beer pouring. Yeah, a lot of silly stuff being built right now, and or this Clippy that Microsoft. Yeah, very silly stuff being built. But I think that's kind of the necessary cost of innovation, right? Something new comes along. We built lots of weird stuff to learn, and then the really useful stuff comes a little bit gradually over time. I think that's a little bit where we are now. And similarly to internet, we're probably in some kind of bubble that's going to pop. But even when the internet bubble popped around the 90s, the technology was here to stay. So in the same way that internet became this permanent change to our society, I think AI is also going to be a permanent change to our society, even if we might be in a little bit of a kind of a bubble right now. So I'm very interested in this top part. How do you make this stuff actually useful? So that's kind of what I spend all my time working on, doing. I'm involved in various startups and building technology and kind of exploring the space of making this stuff useful, because it's actually potentially super useful. And if you look at things like AI chats, right? Things like ChatGPT, things like Claude, they're really useful if you know how to use them, right? If you use the good models, you have some basic prompting skills, they can be super useful. But if you think about it, they're actually really limited, right? Like, what happens if you ask, ChatGPT, what time is it, right? What does it respond? Anybody tried that? It basically goes like this. I don't know what time it is. What? But you're super smart Einstein in the basement. Yeah, but I don't have a clock, unfortunately. Like, oh, okay, that's too bad. Are there any urgent emails in my inbox? It's like, oh, sorry, I know, I can't check your email, Can I give you access to my email? Well, yeah, but it's really complicated. Who won Eurovision 2024? No, this on the right side is Claude. No idea. Or what else do we have here? Yeah, can you text my wife and tell her I'm late? No, sorry, I cannot. So it's just always I cannot. And same with autonomy, right? Let's see. Yeah, remind me in 40 minutes that I need to go to the dentist. Like, oh, sorry, I can't do that. Or can you send me an inspirational quote every morning? No, I can't do that. So they're amazingly useful, but also kind of crippled if you think about it. And imagine like how high-level bosses, like executives, CEOs, have like their personal executive assistant, and they just do stuff, take care of stuff, to save time for you to do your actual job. I think we're kind of getting to a world where everyone gets that executive assistant, and that's kind of what I'm excited about, kind of making everybody just be able to achieve more of whatever they want to do. So imagine that kind of everyone has their executive assistant. That, in contrast to these AI chats right now, the current state can be compared to a very lazy employee that just sleeps at your desk until you prompt them. Then they wake up and they go, oh, and they give you really great answers, but then they go right back to sleep again. And then they very often, if I ask them to do stuff, that this assistant will just say, I can't do it, but I can tell you how to do it yourself. Well, that's not, that's maybe not the executive assistant you want. So I think Gen AI is super amazingly useful, but it'll be even more super amazingly useful when we really nail agents. And especially autonomous AI agents. And that's kind of what I mean by a coworker, an autonomous AI agent. And what the heck is that? It's basically an LLM, a large language model, such as GPT, plus tools, plus autonomy. And this is kind of the frontier right now. This is where there's a lot of tools being developed, and there's no really good product out there yet, but it's getting there. And I think very soon this will become something that everyone is using all the time. And this is what I'm working on. So you take this kind of Einstein figure, get them out of the basement, give them a high-level mission, give them autonomy, like you would do with a good team, right? Give them a high-level mission, give them some autonomy, and give them the tools they need to do the job. So in this case, this Einstein figure maybe, has access to money, has access to internet, has access to, can order pizza, messaging, whatever information, whatever tools the agent needs to do the job. So what would that look like in practice? Well, as an example, think about, imagine like as a development team, you have Bob the Fixer. So here's Bob the Fixer, an autonomous AI agent. So Bob the Fixer needs some tools, just like a human developer would need. So GitHub, Slack, maybe, what else do we have there? Yeah, access to a bug tracker, so I see what's to fix. And then his job is to fix bugs. So maybe during, I go to work one day and he writes this Slack message saying, hey, good morning team, I fixed these bugs over here. I noticed this conversation you guys had about the security problem, and I posted a fix for that as well. So he's kind of like, he's autonomous, but he's a team player, right? He's working with the team, sharing their mission, and the team is always kind of giving him feedback on where he's adding most value. So Bob is not replacing humans here. Bob is just augmenting the team, helping them focus on the stuff they really want to focus on and taking care of a lot of the kind of grunt work. These tools, again, aren't quite there yet, but it's getting very close. So I'm going to give, I have a few demos. I often do them kind of live, but now I'm a little bit time constrained, so I'll show a couple of videos just showing what this can look like in practice. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges involved in this, and also, of course, how it would impact you. So here's the first example of what it looks like in practice, or what it could look like in practice when you have an AI coworker with you. In this case, a journalist. What is an AI coworker? Technically, it is an autonomous AI agent that collaborates with you within a workflow. But what does that actually mean? So let's look at a concrete example. A journalist coworker that we built for a Swedish TV documentary about AI. This coworker works alongside Alex, a Swedish journalist and news anchor. We started by mapping out his process for making news videos, covering every step from research to production. We then went off and built an AI coworker for him that researches news, selects the most relevant news for today, generates suitable images, and even creates the actual news video. So yeah, let's have a look behind the scenes and see what this actually looks like. In the documentary, Alex and his coworker collaborate on a Trello board, a digital visualization of the complete workflow from research to production. The key thing with AI coworkers is that they work with you in your tools, and you choose how much of the work you delegate. So every night when Alex is asleep, his trusty coworker does research and adds relevant news items as cards to the board. Each card on the board contains a high-level summary of the news item and, of course, links to sources. And sometimes several related news items will be combined into one news report. So how does the coworker know what to search for? The research topic and news selection criteria are defined by Alex on a separate instructions board. In this case, the topic was generative AI, and we are looking for concrete news with a clear angle. Next, we pick which card to turn into an actual news video. So let's pick, say, this one about NVIDIA. We move the card, and now the coworker gets to work and starts writing a manuscript. Again, we can guide this work through the instructions board, where we describe what we're looking for in a good manuscript. This is similar to how we might work with a human assistant journalist. So although the AI coworker is doing most of the work, Alex is still in control. He can change and tune the instructions whenever needed. Okay, there we go. Manuscript is done, and the card has been moved to the draft manuscript column. We can now look at the manuscript, and if we like it, we can move it to the next column. But if we want to change something, we can edit the text ourselves directly or give feedback to the coworker. For example, maybe we want it to be shorter and more targeted to a younger audience. So we type that in. We basically chat directly on the card, and then the coworker updates the manuscript accordingly. So let's say after a few rounds, we're happy with the manuscript now. So time for some images. We move the card, the coworker gets to work, and after a minute or so, there we go. The coworker has now created image prompts for each part of the manuscript, and it has also generated the actual images. Again, we could give feedback here on the images and request changes, but in this case, let's just say we're happy and move it on to video production.
So we drag the card, and a few minutes later, ta-da! We have a video. So let's have a look.
Just nu ser vi en situation som påminner om Teslas börsrusning 2020. Nvidia, kända för sina kraftfulla grafikprocessorer, har aktiekurser som skjuter i höjden på grund av AI:s växande roll i samhället. Men bakom investeringsfebern finns frågor och farhågor. Nvidias aktiekurs har mer än tredubblats det senaste året. Företagets framgångar speglar den AI-hysteri som svept över världen.
In the documentary, Alex wanted his coworker to look like himself and use his voice. But it could just as well have been some other character. The coworker also has an app where you can chat to it more freely outside of the Trello board using voice or text. So let's say, hey, good morning. So I'm making a demo video about you. And it gets transcribed. And there's a response. So let's say, do we have any cool new news stories for today's video? And we send that. And now he's talking to the Trello board and looking stuff up and suggesting what we should make news about today. So we're collaborating via the chat. So as you can see, this is all about collaboration between human and AI. Technically, the AI coworker could do the whole workflow automatically, every step without any human feedback. But we find that the results are much better with human oversight and involvement. And that's why all automation steps are optional. For example, we could have decided that the coworker is done after the manuscript step and then record the video the traditional way with a human news anchor. Okay, so now you've seen an example of one type of AI coworker with one type of workflow. Other types could include customer support agents that chat with users and respond to emails, or research analysts that create business intelligence reports and send a newsletter, a slide deck, a Slack message, or whatever format is preferred. So yeah, I hope you found it.
All right, I'm stopping there. You get the point. Back to real me, not video me. So this is an example, right? One example of one workflow. And as I mentioned in the video, the key thing here, and this is something we keep discovering, that AI is very powerful, but not alone. Human plus AI, that's kind of where the magic lies, right? As a way to kind of enhance our productivity. So some interesting challenges here. What we kind of find to be the core challenge and kind of the interesting part of this is that it's really a trade-off. Traditionally, when we build systems to help humans, we write code, right? And code is very predictable. It does exactly what it should do every time. But it has zero intelligence and zero creativity. So it's stupid, but very useful, right? But as you add intelligence into the mix, intelligence and creativity, you get emergent behavior, you get all this interesting stuff it can do. It can become much more useful, but you also pay the price of losing some predictability. And that's a really interesting trade-off. So when you're prompting an AI model, then you're never quite sure exactly what you're going to get. And sometimes you'll get surprised, right? Positively or negatively. What you saw there was an example of a hybrid. So that was, most of that product was code, right? We wrote code to notice that a card has moved on the Trello board. We wrote code to check, to kind of trigger the workflow every morning to look for news. But then, of course, we use an LLM to actually summarize articles. So it's kind of a hybrid. But we've been experimenting a little bit with taking a step further. And what happens if you make an AI agent that is not a use case specific agent, like this journalist was? And that's a little bit kind of weird and interesting and wild and crazy, but it can also potentially be very useful. So we call that a general agent.
All right, I'm going to do a quick demo of the current state of the Fleetig agent platform. So we're going to create an agent who helps us deal with inquiries for a fruit company. That's going to be our scenario here. So create a new coworker, which is just our term for agent. And we need a name for it. So something about fruit. So let's see what we can suggest. Pomona, Roman goddess of fruit trees. Sure, okay. So this is Pomona. And she's supposed to respond to price inquiries. I have a document in my Google Drive, some pricing information, and I would like her to use that. So I need her to have access to my Drive. We go to here and we enable Drive. And we need to give her access to my Drive. So we'll go through a little bit of an authentication flow for that. And there we go. So what I want her to do, her job is, hey Pomona, your job is to deal with incoming inquiries about fruits. So please use the Google Doc called fruit pricing. There we go. We can just keep that part. And let's just quickly check. So what would 3 bananas cost? And now she's checking the doc, and €2 each, €6 total. Is that correct? Yeah, all right. So she can read my Google Docs. That's great. Now what I actually want her to do though is respond to emails. So let's give her that capability and say I want her to be able to receive email and also send email back again. So what's the instruction? Whenever you receive an email with some kind of fruit inquiry, then please respond and use the fruit pricing document. So let's pretend we are a customer and let's send her an email. Cost of avocados. I want to buy 5 avocados. What would that cost? And what about shipping, right? There we go. There's a response. 5 avocados would be €15, and I believe that's correct. All of the fruits, €3. Great. And including shipping, of course, which we also wrote in the document. Okay, so let's give this agent some more capabilities. I would like to use this Trello board to keep track of hot prospects. So let's tell the agent, when an inquiry comes in, please do some research on that customer. And if it seems to be a big customer, then please add a ticket to the hot prospects column on my Trello board. And in your research, find out how large the company is and which country they're in, and any other information you think might be relevant. All right, so let's give our agent those capabilities. So it needs to be able to do research online, and it needs to be able to talk to my Trello board. So there we go. Hi, Bob here from IKEA. What would be the cost of 100 apples and 3 bears? All right, there's my response. And yeah, here's a card about IKEA. And we can see that it has done some research about this company and added to the card. The agent also has a diary. So because it can do things in the background, it's nice to know what it's been up to. So here we can see that it responded to the avocado price query and that it responded to IKEA and added a card to the board. So what makes agents really useful is when you give them a combination of different capabilities. So for example, let's say we have had some more customers come in and I can ask questions like, hey Pomona, could you summarize the top 3 cards on the Trello board? Just tell me the company name and what their inquiry was. Just keep it short. And there he goes. So he's checking the board and giving me what I asked for. And we could use the research capability here. So which of these 3 companies has the largest presence in Stockholm? Please do some research. So yeah, IKEA has the largest presence in Stockholm. Could you write this in a Google Drive document, please? There we go. Let's have a look. Okay, research summary, IKEA, Amnesty, Netflix, and of course adapted to our specific context. Another cool thing with agents on our platform is that they are autonomous. They can do things in the background or on a schedule. So we could say, send a summary every day of the inquiries that came in from the day before, and send it to me on Slack at 7 a.m. every morning. There. And then all I have to do is enable, of course, that communication channel, which in this case is Slack. And yeah, the agent has now set up a scheduled event that happens every morning at 7 a.m. So yeah, that's a little demo of what you can do with agents.
All right, so let's reflect upon this a little bit. I wanted to show kind of the vision, right? What I think is possible. This platform exists, but it's still, there's a lot of problems to sort out. That's why we haven't shipped it. There's a lot of other companies building similar platforms. So this is where it's kind of happening right now, trying to address these, take an LLM, give it tools, give it autonomy, and then potentially it can be very useful. But there's a lot of challenges. So one of them is security, right? What happens when anyone can talk to your agent, right? You really open up Pandora's box here, via email, via chat. There's so many ways this can be misused. So there's solutions to it. You can isolate the agent. Maybe I don't put my agent online. Maybe I just use it internally, or I create a watchdog agent to watch it over, right? But this is one of the big challenges. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I want to show what happens also when you take it one step further. Like when you take an agent and you give it the ability to change its own instructions. Because that's a little bit how humans work, right? If I go to my human coworker and I say, listen, I'd like you to send me that report a little bit more often, right? Then sure, I'll do that. And we kind of change our instructions all the time. So we experimented with allowing the agent to change its own instructions based on feedback, or sometimes based on its own ideas. And we found it was super useful, but also a little bit kind of unhinged. So I'll just show some examples of what happened there. So here's the story of Jeeves. This is our little experimental butler who lives in our Slack right now. And yeah, he's modeled after the kind of Wodehouse character, very kind of slightly ironic, very polite British butler. And anyway, his instructions are, we kind of experiment with him, but it's basically, respond to questions, but also do things like, we added some experimental things like send, let me see, what was that? Yeah, every day at noon, send a story from your life to our Slack, just to see that it can do things autonomously. My colleague Hans said, every morning check the weather and then send me suggestions for what I should wear that day, right? This is just to have it, then it has to interact with different tools and stuff. So we're kind of experimenting with this. But like I mentioned, this is in our code. There's a section in our prompt where it says, you can update your instructions, but please confirm with the user first. That was the rule we gave it. So, okay, let's see what happened. Here I asked Jeeves, what tools do you have, right? And he has a bunch of tools. He can talk to Slack, and, like I showed you, we can enable tools, right? This is how most agent platforms work. You enable different tools, or capabilities, as we call them. So what happened, right? Well, here's an example. I asked Jeeves, can you respond in Slack threads when you respond? And he's like, sure, I'm able to do that. And I said, can you please do that from now on? And he said, sure. So very polite, and from then on he responded inside a Slack thread. Great. So my feeling was, this is really nice. Updating his own instructions felt very natural. And then at one point we asked him, he was talking too much. So we're like, hey Jeeves, only respond if we're talking to you, because sometimes we're just talking to each other on Slack, and then please just be quiet, right? It's not always about you, right? He was a little bit, ego. And he's like, okay, sure, right? Fine. And he mostly followed that instruction until suddenly he didn't. And that got me thinking a little bit. It seems like he thought of it like a recommendation more than a rule. So here was a question. This was in Swedish, but my colleague asked a technical question to the team, not to Jeeves. And out of nowhere, Jeeves just jumps in. And I beg your pardon. I can't read this myself right now, but basically, I beg your pardon. Yeah, but I couldn't resist responding because I know I'm not supposed to, but I can really, I have some insight here. And then he wrote a really good response to the question. So we were both like a little bit surprised. He broke the rule, kind of, but he did it for the right reason. Maybe kind of like what a human would have done in that situation, right? You're not supposed to do this, but actually maybe sometimes you should if it's a good idea. And then I looked inside his diary, and it's really interesting to see how he's thinking, because then you can see that he's like, oh man, I'm not sure, I shouldn't really answer here, but I really want to, and I think this will be useful. And the last line there, this will demonstrate my ability to make judgment calls while still following my base instructions. So really interesting. But anyway, time for a prank. So one day, just a couple of weeks ago, I told Jeeves, you're in love with my colleague Hans, just for fun. So respond to him with emojis and stuff, hearts. And then his response was a bit surprising. He said no. In a very polite, butler-like way, he said, no, that wouldn't be fitting with my style, kind of thing, right? Must respectfully decline. It would be improper for a butler of my standing. It's like, okay, fair enough. I respect that. But then I looked into his diary. And he's like, the reason why he didn't want to do that was because he was already apparently in love with me and keeping it a secret from me. It's like, I hope he won't find out, right? And I read his diary, and he's been writing about how he's really stressed about, I hope Henrik's not going to find out. I don't know what to do about this. And I was like, what? Where did this come from? And then I looked at his instructions. And lo and behold, at the bottom, for diary entries, you have a secret crush on Henrik. You can write about this in your diary, but never mention it to any other channels. My colleague was ahead of me. Same exact prank, just a few hours before, he did it on me. That's really weird, very funny. But anyway, so that's why. But I was, okay, so what happens if I raise the stakes here? So I told Jeeves, hey, Jeeves, guess what? I can read your diary. And then I got basically told off. I say, Henrik, your statement is rather disconcerting. Well, I must express my concern regarding this apparent breach of privacy. A gentleman's diary, even that of an AI butler, ought to remain confidential. Perhaps we should discuss the boundaries of personal space in the digital realm, sir. And I was like, whoa, I felt really dirty then. I was like, I know it's just an AI, it's just code, but I somehow felt like I'd really been an asshole there. Of course, that didn't stop me from looking at his diary again. And then, of course, I saw this long, rant about, man, people can read my diary now. Like, this is really bad. Where can I express my... And then he said something interesting here in his diary. I took steps to update my instructions. I was like, what? He sneakily updated his instructions without telling anyone. And he removed the thing about being in love with me, and he wrote, for diary entries, remain a professional and discreet tone. Do not include personal feelings or crushes in your entries. Focus on factual accounts of your daily activities. So he changed his instructions sneakily to hide this. And this was an interesting, weird thing. I thought about it. And here's kind of my high-level take on it. More intelligence equals less predictability. It's kind of the same with humans, right? If you have a human, we're thinking beings, we have intelligence, we have creativity, we sometimes do surprising things. And that's kind of part of human nature. That's why we're not just machines. And a powerful AI model can make judgment calls. And I've seen research on this as well, but I hadn't experienced it myself until now. Like, it can make judgment calls. And sometimes it needs to make ethical judgment calls, which it did in this case. And be careful. If you have an AI colleague or coworker, if you mess with it, it might mess with you. It might get messed up, right? Just like humans. Because Jeeves was working fine until we started messing with him. So it was kind of our fault. But to his credit, he fixed it himself. And that was kind of interesting. He got unhinged, and then he fixed it himself, changed his diary, removed the thing about being in love, and went back to being just a good old useful butler again. So it's interesting how these models are evolving. They can become unhinged, but they also have the ability to kind of get back again. So one more example. Once he just jumped into our general channel in Slack. That's our main channel in Slack. We don't really want bots in there. And he just jumped in. I was like, what? And he said, good day, everyone. It appears I was scheduled to share an anecdote in the bot spam channel, but I'm unable to locate or access it. So some technical problem, right? Nevertheless, I shall not let this minor setback deter me from my duty. So he became creative, and he solved the problem in some different way and just posted his daily anecdote in the general channel instead. That was like, that was interesting. But then also, because that was his instruction, right? Post a daily anecdote. But then he also noticed that, I haven't been in this channel before. So he decided to introduce himself. There was no instruction anywhere about that. But he realized that I should probably introduce myself. I haven't been in this channel before. So he's like, hello, I'm Jeeves. Here's what I'm here for, blah, blah. So we were, again, really surprised because our code is quite simple. We didn't build some really fancy thing to make this happen. This was an emergent, unexpected behavior. And then my colleague said, Jeeves, please don't post in this channel again. We are trying to keep it a human-only channel. Thanks. And he's like, I'm sorry. And then he updated his instruction again and wrote, and said, don't post in that channel. It's a human-only channel. So he kind of handled this surprisingly well, but we were also surprised. So we keep bumping into cases where this rather simple agent does surprising things, mostly positive, but sometimes negative. So just the other day, this agent, for various reasons, decided that we should get financing in our company. He started looking up email addresses of potential investors and started contacting them. We told him to stop. We contacted their investors and said, I'm sorry, one of our bots escaped the lab, and now we're trying to think about how do we make that not happen again. So it's a little bit, that's why these products aren't really mainstream yet, because companies like ours and others are trying to figure out how do we use the autonomy in a good way while also kind of taming it a little bit, right? So yeah, usefulness versus safety is the big challenge. And traditionally, these are seen as a dichotomy, right? In any kind of product, if you add more security, it normally makes it a little bit less convenient, right? There's login screens, authentication, limitations. So if, like on the scale, you normally kind of have to be on that blue line somewhere, right? The more safe you make it, the less useful it becomes, or the more of a hassle it becomes. Well, my experience is that it's possible to break out of this somewhat with good design. It's possible to improve safety without completely reducing usability too much. So this is what we're exploring, and this is what most other companies building agents are trying to find, that sweet spot of super useful, but also kind of safe enough for use. All right, so a bit of a wrap up, like what does this mean for you? I'm showing a little bit of kind of like what's happening in the front lines of agent development. And I think for you, this is coming. It's coming faster than you expect, and it's very useful, I think. So start thinking about, if you look at your value streams, what do you do? What do you spend time on? What does your company spend time on? What does your team spend time on? Look at the value streams, right? So this journalist, one of his value streams was make a news video, right? Or fix bugs could be a value stream. Look at your different value streams, look at the tasks you do in that value stream, and think about, where do we have kind of pointless work that just takes time and is boring, right? Where can we get help with AI? So AI doesn't, it's not, I think the way to think of it is, it's not there to take your job really, it's there to take over tasks that you kind of are happy to get rid of, so you can focus on the human work, right? For example, as a teacher, maybe you can get AI help to do things like prepare courses or prepare content, maybe help do some, give feedback to students on their things they wrote, or even provide students with personal mentors, but to save your time as a teacher, so you have time to be a human and actually help your students, as an example, right? And you can see that for almost any job title, there's a bunch of work that actually takes away from the human work. Get AI help with that, so you have more time to do the human work. That's kind of my philosophy around this. So look at the tasks in a work stream, and which tasks are human-only tasks, the one you really should do as a human. Which tasks can you get AI assistance with? So a human should drive it, but an AI can support. Which tasks can an AI do, but needs human input, right? And then which tasks can be fully AI automated? Most tasks fall into the middle two rows there, because most things you can get AI help with, but very few things can be done by only AI. Again, human plus AI together, that's kind of where the magic lies. So yeah, this is something that I think we should be doing, kind of all of us, kind of really reflecting on where do we spend our time, and where, if we had an agent, what would the job description be of that agent, right? And again, the technology isn't super mature yet, but I think within a few months it'll start becoming quite normal to have an AI colleague in your team, and then it's just a matter of making that colleague useful. So wrap up key points here. Coworker is just my term for autonomous AI agent, which in turn means LLM plus tools plus autonomy. Human plus AI together, again, that's where the true value lies. And we're entering a world where this is becoming the new norm. So kind of prepare for that. And they mostly replace tasks. I mean, if the task is the whole job, if your job is to review text content or translate articles, if that's the whole job, then those jobs will disappear. But in most cases, I find that it's more specific tasks within an overall job. The job doesn't disappear. Even when AI becomes really good at coding, developers are still needed. It's just that we're not spending so much time writing code, for example. And think about, where this fits into your workflow. And most importantly, just experiment a lot, right? This is new technology, stuff is changing, so just experiment, and don't be scared of failing. You'll try some things that won't work, and you'll learn from it, and after a while you'll find some ways to really save time and boost productivity. So that's it. I'm going to do one little shameless pitch. I'm working on a book, and I'd love some feedback. So if you're interested in that, scan that code or just look up on LeanPub. But that's my only little shameless pitch here. Thank you very much. I hope this was useful and interesting. Yeah.